I know what you believe by the way you behave. So, what do I know about you? Welcome to Come in the Chaos Interfaith Center, where we sometimes tackle tough questions and sometimes there are no answers. But I can tell you that I understand your beliefs from your behavior, from the way you live your life. And when I ask people about this, I find it's fascinating to hear what they have to say about belief versus what they do. I moved here a year ago to a pretty much conservative Christian area of the country. It's an area populated with Amish and Mennonite evangelicals and people who wholeheartedly agree that the country should be a Christian nation. So this question of how do you behave begs for some serious thought because, you see, I renovated a good portion of the house I purchased here, and most of the people that I hired let me know their religious beliefs in our introductory chat as homeowner and electrician or plumber or carpenter. I sensed that they believed it would garner more trust from this new customer if they told me they were Christian. Most of the workers did this, and I say most because there were 4 men who worked here and said nothing to me about anything other than the details of the painting they were doing. 3 of them didn't speak English, but all 4 of them spoke Arabic. They never mentioned being Muslims. But being an interfaith elder, I just had to bring up the subject, and I asked the man who spoke English, what brought you guys here to Lancaster? Where do you worship? And so on. To me, knowing a person's religious identity isn't all that significant because there's a huge spectrum of behavior associated with every religion, from the very devout to those who egregiously misinterpret the doctrines and behave poorly. There's a person very close to me who has identified in the past as a Wiccan and another time as Buddhist. And right now, I'm not sure she has any need for a spiritual label whatsoever. But her behavior, the way she lives her life in service of others, would make any group of people proud to have her as a member. It doesn't matter to me if you tell me you're a Presbyterian, an atheist, a Celtic Druid. If you're in the midst of people, planet, and animals who are suffering and they're in need and you do nothing, you're missing the point of how to live in harmony during your mortal stay here. Here's an interesting observation. Jesus didn't tell people in his day or leave evidence for us generations later on what to believe. He made promises and he told us what to do, but he didn't tell us what to believe. The most famous scripture of Jesus teaching us how to live is what's called the Sermon on the Mount. You can find it in the Bible. It's in the book of Matthew, chapters 5, 6, and 7. Jesus sat down on a mountainside with people gathered all around him, and he taught more lessons in this one episode of his ministry than can be fit into an AP social studies curriculum. Of course, his lessons that day were not only for the people gathered, they're appropriate for all of us at all times. He opens with what are called the Beatitudes, telling everyone how they must behave in order to receive mercy, inheritance, comfort, and the kingdom of heaven itself, which is true peace. In other words, how can you have a satisfying life doing what's required while your soul is in this mortal form? And the word used to acknowledge that you're doing the right thing is that you will be blessed, or sometimes read blessed. He continues with a metaphor. Oh, Jesus was all about metaphors. He tells us that we're the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Salt should have taste. In other words, action, not just sit there on the plate. And our lights should be shining with and for others, not be hidden. In other words, find your talent, your passion, what lights you up, and then make the world better by using that. I know what you believe by how you behave. There's instruction about lust and about divorce. He reminds us that committing adultery is not limited to a married person having physical sex with another person. Adultery can happen when a bonded person has an emotional affair online. Now, Jesus didn't know about texting. I'm just bringing the lesson into the 21st century. And the words on divorce? Well, they've been used against people to harm them spiritually. Because the divorce phrases are a place where we must understand cultural norms of the day. Women were property in Jesus' time and had to live in a house of a male who was responsible for her. Remember at the cross when Jesus called to his mother and to John and basically gave his mother to John for her protection. Jesus referred to John as his mother's son, giving her protection from the Romans and a stable life. Back to divorce. The Roman Catholic Church has refused Eucharist to people who are divorced because of this passage. They withheld a powerful way for a divorced woman to stay connected to her God and to Jesus, and instead shamed her. This is where we look deeper at the lesson and remember cultural norms. Let's say divorce should not be taken lightly, because I cannot imagine the God of my understanding to have wanted the woman to remain in a situation where she was belittled and beaten daily. I know what you believe by how you behave. Jesus tells us not to take oaths, and yet we put our hands on the very Bible containing that instruction and take an oath to tell the truth in a court of law. Well, that's not what it's really all about. Jesus was teaching the people to not use oath swearing to make a point. Just an honest yes or no is sufficient. He also is warning people, you and I, against people who use the terms like, I swear to God, as they seem to need that kind of wording because they may be either dishonest or deceitful. That's what the passage is about. He asks us to be bigger than ordinary people who are mannerly and kind to people like them. Jesus reminds us to be as loving and kind to strangers and enemies as we are to those who sit in the pews with us. When an obviously needy person attends a church, do people reach out? Or do they recoil from the stranger and wait to see what she does during the hour before allowing themselves to interact? I know what you believe by how you behave. Be humble. The Sermon on the Mount goes on to say, if you need a newspaper reporter to notice that you made and delivered 400 sandwiches to a homeless shelter, you've missed the point. This always reminds me of a question that was posed for discussion in an adult Sunday school class. Now, we all like to get as many deductions on our income tax pages as we can. I do keep track of mileage and such. But here's the question. If I get something in return, is it truly, really charity? Please chat this one over at the dinner table. An example is it true charity if I get a deduction for the hundreds of dollars of things I donate to community aid or to Goodwill? Let's look at the large sum donated to a church versus the few bucks tossed into the guitar case of an ill man playing the guitar on the sidewalk. There's no right answer to this. It's just a question of the heart. It's all between you and God. But remember, between you and God, there is no between. The God in you has to grapple with these details. During the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus takes a breath and he prays with people. It's what has become known as the Lord's Prayer. He tells us to pray in private, to reduce distractions, I'm sure. And then the recitation that has no excess words, no run-on sentences, or weak phrases follows. It's to the point, and it holds a lot of information. Then there's the reminder that all the decluttering businesses should just love. Jesus tells us that collecting stuff is pointless. We should put our efforts into acquiring a body of heart experiences that deepen our spiritual lives and bring us into alignment with the divine. I know what you believe by how you behave. Language about letting go of anticipating things and anxiety is also included in this Sermon on the Mount text, with loving words of assurance that all will be well. We need not concern ourselves with what to wear, what to eat or drink. This is difficult. It's a difficult passage for us. Most people listening in today have plenty of money to keep themselves clothed and fed. And yet we worry about having enough. I see it all the time, and it reminds me of the very poorest people that I've met in my life. The people who scrape by, purchasing one banana at a time because of having so little. They know how to survive. I see so much anxiety on the faces of those who have much. We need to let that go. Let go of the illusion between much and little, and truly live in a state of gratitude for what we have. I know what you believe by how you behave. The golden rule is also included in this famous sermon. Whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. When we're in tough situations, pull back to see a big picture and ask yourself, if I were that person, the person who just hurt me or backed into my car or did something egregiously wrong, how would I want to be approached? How would I want to be approached? What language would I want to hear? I can tell what you believe by how you behave. With the Sermon on the Mount telling us so much of how to be and not what to believe, I ask you to ponder which is more important to you, what you do or what you believe, or maybe it's a balance of both. Again, there's no right answer. After Jesus' time on earth, many men wrote creeds of belief and documents telling what we should believe. They were trying to marry the teachings of Jesus with a way to connect people into tribes or groups. In other words, if you believe these things, then you belong to this club. Humans need clubs. We need to belong to something, that's for sure. That's why gangs form in cities. It's a place to be somebody, to be recognized as part of a group. And again, I say to you, actions speak louder than words. I know what you believe by how you behave. When you're volunteering at the elementary school or working on the board of a local charity, when you offer to help an elderly person get her groceries into the car, when you drive a friend home from the hospital, it doesn't matter to me if you believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, or if Jesus Christ, his only Son, was conceived by the Holy Spirit and born of the Virgin Mary. Whether or not you believe in the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting, doesn't count for much if the people around you are suffering, lonely, and heartbroken, and you're doing nothing about it. I will clearly know what you believe by how you behave. Be well, do good deeds, and love one another. The music recommendation today is a handbell and hand chime choir playing You Raise Me Up. Blessings on all.